And I'm Laura Goldman, the dietitian with Premier Weight Loss, and running on a theme where I know this might seem repetitive this month, but I do think it's very important to deliver this message for a variety of different scenarios. It is about our nutrition strategies during GLP-1 titration this week. So if you've been with me for some of the other previous presentations, some of this will be familiar, but I think that's very helpful to just get all of this into sort of our routine and hopefully take away the thinking aspect, and so you'll just know what to do. And like I say every week, and this is the part I repeat no matter what, it is the quality of your calories that matters. And that's why we are touching on nutrition strategies during GLP-1 medication titration, or basically increasing the dose, because for a lot of people, that's when the quality is going to be even more important, because chances are our portions are going to decrease. So what we plan to cover today is why titration can impact your appetite, some practical strategies to deal with staying adequately hydrated, which is a part of your nutrition. So hydration and nutrition, it's all together there. Some practical strategies for portion sizes, as well as protein intake. And also touching on how to identify those hunger and fullness cues, since that may feel a little different. Now, why is it that we are told to anticipate, or that we've experienced feeling different after having a dose titration? And essentially what you can imagine is, since these medications are designed to help us feel fuller longer, or this is the nature of them, we feel fuller for longer, it slows gastric emptying, then it stands to reason that if we're increasing the dose and having more of that, then that will lead to increased feelings of fullness and can further slow the gastric emptying. And with those types of changes that we might experience, GI symptoms are common. The good news is they are generally not severe, and over time, those feelings can decrease. So it's not like a permanent sentence to feeling yucky or anything like that. But the idea is to know what to expect, have a plan of action, and we want to work with the medications, not necessarily against them. Our first area that we'll focus on is what to do about hydration when we are titrating up. I think this is an area that's very important to focus on, because I think it's an area that also falls by the wayside all too often. Because we talk about decreased appetite, but we don't often tie that to our sense of thirst. We don't often tie that to whether or not we need to drink more or less water. And these medications, along with that decrease in appetite, there is also an association with a decreased thirst response. And so you have this decreased thirst response, which also we can have that over time as we get older. We tend to not also feel thirsty as easily. And then we also have these dose increases where we have GI symptoms that might make us not want too much fluid, or if we're having any vomiting or diarrhea, that also leads to fluid loss. So with all of this combined, there's that higher risk of dehydration. And that also comes with a risk of kidney damage. So we do really want to focus on this and stay hydrated. A typical goal that is established is around 2 to 3 liters, or about 8 to 12 cups, but this really does depend on your physical activity and your needs. I also like to say that if your urine is a light straw color, assuming that you're not taking any medications or have any conditions that would color your urine in a different way, if you are otherwise healthy and it's a light straw color, you can know that that is a sign that you are well hydrated. And to try and meet your goal, since large amounts at once or large amounts of fluid with meals, it's better to actually sip throughout the day, maybe a few sips here, a few sips there, a few ounces at a time, and avoid those large amounts, which can make you also feel very full. And some people would also describe that as feeling bloated. So sipping throughout the day. Also, please know that foods that contain fluids, so watermelon, for example, or some really like crunchy, juicy vegetables, if you think about celery or cucumber, that does have fluid. So do know that you are getting it there, but usually drinking is going to be a more efficient way. Also, room temperature or warm fluids may be better tolerated than ice cold. I know for myself, really, really cold water can almost make my throat start to hurt. And so go with what works best for you. And to watch out for some signs of inadequate hydration or dehydration, if you notice darker urine or infrequent urination, maybe some extra confusion or dizziness, I would strongly advise that you contact your provider if you're experiencing those. And please know that just because these are some signs of dehydration, these are not always signs of dehydration. They could be pointing to something else. So again, it's still important to reach out to your provider. Moving on to protein, we can't escape it. It's still a priority because, as we know, if we don't get in enough protein intake while losing weight, there is a greater loss of lean body mass. And what I tell a lot of people is that your muscle equals your metabolism. So as we lose weight, some people would say our metabolism slows down, but essentially we don't require as many calories as we lose weight. But since our muscle is a very big calorie utilizer, holding on to that muscle can at least help us burn as many calories as possible as we lose weight, which is something I think we're looking for. It's much easier to regain weight if our calorie needs suddenly plummet because we don't have a lot of muscle mass on ourselves. So a general target is around 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. This does depend on your body composition, of course, kidney function, and your physical activity. I tend to edge toward the 1.2 gram per kilogram for most people, but again, this does depend on the person. In your education packet that you may have received when you were first starting with Premier Weight Loss, the general guidelines are also around 90 grams for women and 120 grams for men. So that can also be a decent starting point if you'd like to go that route. I think it's very important, though, I'm talking about grams and grams per kilogram and trying to add all this up, but I really do think it's important to avoid fatigue with following, trying to follow a healthy diet. Many people can find it tedious if they're trying to count everything out to the 10th of a gram or something like that. I don't think it's as important to be counting out to the gram. I think it's more important to have the intention behind it. So try and pick some protein for every meal and snack and opt to eat that first. That way, even if you're not hitting your target, you know that you are still getting protein in. And that's the very base starting point, because there are many people who struggle to even get protein in or can sometimes forget to have protein. It's also very important to spread it out through the day. And while I'm talking about the importance of protein for maintaining your muscle, there is a second component to that. So muscle preservation and muscle gain is further supported if you have some weight or strength resistance training, but again, it's as you can tolerate it and what your provider recommends. I know someone who was actually put on, lifting restrictions because of a recent surgery, and they were advised, once appropriate, to start walking with ankle weights. And I think they were only 3-pound ankle weights, so it wouldn't feel like a lot. But amazingly, their leg muscle mass, even though the amount of strength training they were able to do had essentially disappeared for that time being, muscle mass maintained simply from the ankle weights and that intention behind the nutrition choices as well. Moving on to finding practical ways to deal with your side effects and to get in portions. I wanted to give a few tips here, which you may already know, but I think it's always important to repeat because then it will eventually become just muscle memory, for lack of a better phrase there. So first and foremost, if your stomach is emptying more slowly, try and lighten that pressure, that meal pressure, with smaller meals throughout the day. And what I really do mean by this is if you normally eat 3 meals a day, just take whatever that meal is. So what your breakfast would normally be, just cut it in half, have half a breakfast at 6 a.m., half a breakfast at 8 a.m., and so on. I think sometimes people get caught up in the idea that they need to come up with 6 separate types of meals. I say, again, keep it simple. Have your 3 meals and then just divide it up into 6 smaller portions. Moving on to some easier or gentler foods, just know that if the foods are a little easier on your system, they can move through your system faster and they tend to be lower in fat and also a bit higher in moisture. So dry, tough, chewy meats might not be the first choice. But having broths or even meat in a broth, some cooked vegetables, yogurt, and then if your nausea is particularly strong, I know usually having cooler foods where fragrance might not be as strong can be helpful, but also choosing lower fiber options can also help. Fiber does have a tendency to want to sit. It's very, very healthy, and I do encourage increasing fiber over time because we can see in the next section here with constipation that can be addressed with increased fiber and increased fluids. So it is important to try and incorporate that when you can. Also with constipation, movement is a very big factor. And so if all 3 of those aren't doing the trick, then I do recommend speaking with your provider about some other options if necessary. And then finally, remember to eat slowly and stop when you are satisfied. And so that means, or maybe you can take a pause and say, I could eat more, but I don't need to eat more. And that can take a while to get there. But with that in mind, trying to figure out what hunger and fullness cues look like and how to recognize those can be tough. Also, the timing of how you feel with hunger and fullness can potentially change. I've had people tell me that their appetite almost completely disappears initially, and they almost have to remind themselves to eat. And so it might be hard to recognize hunger and fullness at that point in time, but over time, hopefully you'll feel that. And it might be more about recognizing when you feel full instead of hungry initially. So I have the hunger scale here on the left. I've given this as an example before, but this does also give you some ideas on recognizing hunger if it's not the physical feeling. So some people might feel very dizzy if they're super, super hungry, or low energy, irritable. Maybe their stomach growling, but I know sometimes people get more irritable. And then when you are reaching about a 5 or a 6, that's really when we want to say stop. And so you can see here a 5 is saying neither hungry nor full, which is a perfect area to be. We don't need to feel as though we are reaching the limit of our stomach's capacity to feel satisfied. And I'm sure you recognize those days where you felt like you've eaten too much, and also those days where you think, oh, okay, I actually feel settled here. I also mentioned here that maybe foods, if you take a chance to pause and then look at something you were enjoying 10 minutes ago, and now you look at it and you think, well, this doesn't really seem all that appealing anymore. That might be your sign that you are full. And so feel free to take a screenshot of this scale if you think that will help guide you. We're already here at the tail end for some challenges of the week, and these are very common challenges, but I think part of the reason why they're so common is they are also some of the more difficult ones to achieve for many people, because these are what a lot of people come to me to talk to me about. So challenge number 1 is that focus on hydration. I recommend tracking your fluid intake for up to 3 days. If you have an app in your phone, if you have a water bottle with different markings, or even just using your phone notes. Or for me, I'm actually a pen and paper kind of person. And so have yourself a little booklet to just write down what you've been drinking. And how does that compare to what we talked about being the 2 to 3 liter target? And if you feel like you've had more than normal because you've been really focused on it, how's your energy? How is your regularity? I'd be very interested to know if you notice any differences there. And then the second challenge is protein first. And so for 3 meals this week, so it could even be 3 meals on one day, make sure that on your plate you've identified a protein and that's the first thing you eat before anything else. This might be a challenge with a casserole or something like that, so certainly have some intention behind some of these meals so that you don't have that extra hurdle to overcome. But try and focus on that, especially if that's been an area that you have not been focused on quite as much. And see if that makes any difference in how you feel. Are you getting fuller faster? Are you feeling more satisfied? Maybe you have more energy, or you feel like you've been more productive in your workouts. All of these are very interesting to see for yourself, but also I recommend and appreciate any feedback and updates on that type of progress, because always sharing our successes or maybe where we fall short can be very helpful for ourselves and other people who are going through this. So to put all of this together, just know that dose increases during your weight loss journey is a part of the process. So most people don't just stick at one dose ad infinitum. And so there is a likelihood of having side effects because those tend to be very common. The good news is, though, they're usually not severe and they do decrease over time. So we sort of get used to that new routine, get settled in. And it's very important, and why I'm doing these webinars for you and for your benefit is because we want to find ways to work with your medication, whether it be through portion control, protein focus, hydration, because finding those techniques can help you achieve both your weight goals, but also your overall health goals. And with that, I open it to any questions you may have. All right. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. I hope that you found this presentation helpful and maybe have some new ideas or inspiration for the rest of this week. Please don't hesitate to reach out to the Premier Weight Loss team if you'd like to get connected with myself or anyone else that is a provider there. We're always here and happy to help. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.